legal analyst Dan Abrams is breaking down yesterday's biggest takeaways. And House Intelligence Committee leader Adam Schiff is live to answer Republicans who say it was a disaster for Democrats and a big victory for Trump. And Fred Savage reveals if he'd be up for a Wonder Years reboot and how his dad resorted to funny business to help him through childhood auditions. The House of Hot Topics is in session with Whoopi, Abby Huntsman, Joy Behar, Sunny Hostin, Meghan McCain, and Anna Navarro. Now, let's get things started.
Not here today. She has the day off. She's in LA. She's working. She really wanted to be here because, of course, this is the day after the Mueller report. But she's not, and we're here, and we are going to talk about this. So, both sides took very different approaches to their questioning yesterday. Democrats tried to get him to clarify his findings, but most Republicans kind of came for Robert Mueller. Take a look.
The president has repeatedly claimed that your report found there was no obstruction and that it completely and totally exonerated him. But that is not what your report said, is it?
Correct. That is not what the report said.
Did you interview Mifsud?
Can't get into that.
Is Mifsud Western intelligence or Russian intelligence?
Can't get into that.
A lot of things you can't get into. You can charge all kinds of people who are around the president with false statements, but the guy who launches the guy who puts this whole story in motion, you can't charge him.
In your investigation, did you think that this was a single attempt by the Russians to get involved in our election, or did you find evidence to suggest they'll try to do this again?
No, it wasn't a single attempt. They're doing it as we sit here.
So here to help us break down what went down yesterday, please welcome ABC News Chief Legal Analyst Dan Abrams.
Hello, Dan.
Hello, Dan. So, you know who in the White House called the Mueller hearings a devastating day for the Democrats and said Mueller did a horrible job. Nancy Pelosi called it historic. So what did you call it?
Well, look, I think for the Democrats, it didn't give them what they needed, right? The whole point of this, the whole point of the Democrats calling Robert Mueller was for him to bring this thing to life. So there'd be the movie of the Mueller report. That didn't happen at all. So in just that in and of itself is a loss for Democrats. And part of it is their own fault, by the way. I mean, if you watch the questioning in front of the Judiciary Committee, there were a lot of times the Republicans would really go after Mueller. And then at the end of their time, Mueller would seem to want to respond. And then a Democrat would be up, and instead of saying, Mr. Mueller, can you please continue, they would start with some pre-scripted thing about the 3 elements of obstruction and this and that, and they completely lost, I think, the public in that. With that said, this isn't a win for Donald Trump. I mean, you have there, again and again, Robert Mueller, in essence, saying he's lying. He's lying when he says no obstruction. He's lying when he says, I found no collusion. The answers that he gave to us were misleading, generally not truthful. How is that a win for President Trump?
They were very disrespectful, I thought, the Republicans. They have a tendency to be disrespectful to veterans in this country. First, it was John Kerry, swift-boating him, a wounded veteran of the Vietnam War. Then it was Meg's dad, John McCain. His service to the United States was minimized and made fun of, basically, by this guy. And now this, a guy who served in Vietnam. And President Bone Spurs did not serve in Vietnam, and they have the nerve to back him instead of this veteran. It really is upsetting. I don't want to hear the Republicans say that they are the most patriotic party anymore. I don't want to hear it. Or family values as long as they're locking up children. I don't want to hear it anymore.
Look, you could... I think you can criticize politicians who are veterans. Right? And you can take them on.
They were nasty to him.
Well, look, that's true, but keep in mind, he's a Republican. Yeah. That's what people forget. He is a lifelong Republican. And, you know, and there's no evidence that he is a Trump hater, that he's an anti-Trumper, et cetera. And he's the one leading the investigation. Look,
In fact, I would tell you yesterday's testimony and hearing is evidence that he's not a Trump hater. Because if he hated Trump, he could have gone in there and he could have done something very different than what he actually did.
Absolutely true. And by the way, if he was a Trump hater, he wouldn't have in the report said, you know what? I'm not going to decide whether a crime was committed here. You know why? Because if you read the report, it is clear they believe that the elements were there for obstruction of justice. So there's an argument that Mueller did Trump a huge favor by not declaring that in the report. So this idea that he's sort of out to get Trump, you know, just doesn't make any sense. Now, with regard to his staff, you can have different discussions about that.
Well,
but Dan,
go ahead.
Sorry, but Congressman Adler said Mueller's testimony will have a profound impact, and I think that's what we were waiting for, the movie version of the Mueller report, like you said. But people were calling Mueller's performance frail, low energy, and a disappointment. I thought it was daunting that he couldn't remember meeting Rosenstein. He didn't know the name of the president who appointed him. I was very surprised at some of his answers, and I want to know from you. I was just
give him.
You think it was on purpose?
Yes, I do. Do you think that this man? You think this man? I don't think he's frail. Did he appear frail when he came out and said, "Look, this is all I have to say. This is what I said. I put it in the book. I'm not saying anything else. You can call me all you want. So I'm not coming back. You made me come back. Oh yeah, what? I'm sorry, what? You needed? Can you repeat the question?
Well, can I just ask, did this help or hurt?
Did it help or hurt who?
Mueller,
I don't think it was helpful to Mueller, right? I mean, I don't think that. Look, I still have enormous respect for Mueller.
As do I.
Right. So, but
helpful to what? What does Mueller need help on?
Right. Well, look, in terms of
his job,
establishing the credibility of the report.
To me, he looked like a figurehead. He looked like someone who maybe wasn't as adverse at what was going on in the Mueller report and some of the details as someone whose name is on the report.
But when they said to him there were 10 counts of obstruction, he said yes. So that's all you need.
But I think not remembering meeting Rosenstein and not knowing the president who appointed you is not that great.
Well, he had faltered a little bit on that.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between being actively written in, being actively involved in the report versus saying he was a figurehead. There's nothing to indicate he was a figurehead. You talk to anyone sort of involved broadly who knows Mueller, et cetera, there's no way that Mueller was a figurehead.
He said, I don't want to go to this testimony. I don't want to do this hearing. I'm not going to say anything else that's not in this report. The report speaks for itself. And that's exactly what he did yesterday. Whether you like his performance or not, he said what he was going to do, and he did it.
That's true. And the Democrats didn't get what they needed. They had the burden of proof there.
See, they got what they needed. They got what they needed.
Obstruction of justice.
They
had that in the Mueller report.
Yes, they
but
did
now
have
everybody
that,
heard
but now she got what she wanted.
Yeah.
All people wanted to hear him do was read it. Which I said the other day, it makes
whatever
no
it's
sense.
worth, people like Rachel Maddow and Chuck Todd were critical of this.
Well,
it's
that's
not just Republicans.
No, I don't
saying.
think it's just Republicans, but I know a con job when I see one. I'm an actor. I recognize it. Thanks to Dan Abrams. We'll be right back.
How does House Intelligence Chairman Adam Schiff feel about the president doing a victory lap over Robert Mueller's testimony? Did it take impeachment hearings off the table for Democrats? He's live on The View. Next.
From your testimony today, I gather that you believe that knowingly accepting foreign assistance during a presidential campaign is an unethical thing to do.
And a crime.
And to the degree that it undermines our democracy and our institutions, we can agree that it's also unpatriotic.
True.
And wrong.
True.
That was House Intelligence Chairman Adam Schiff getting Robert Mueller to put the findings of his investigation in perspective. But you know who is claiming yesterday's testimony completely exonerates him again and was a disaster for Democrats. Here with his take on this, please welcome live from D.C. Congressman Adam Schiff. Good morning.
Good morning.
Congressman, I thought your opening statement and Chairman Nadler's opening statements were really the best part of yesterday, so congratulations on that. And after the hearings, you tweeted this out. Here's what Mueller said. Russia interfered in our election to help Trump. Russians made numerous contacts with the campaign. Campaign welcomed their help. No one reported these contacts or interference to FBI. They lied to cover it up. So what's your party going to do about that? What are you going to do with this information?
Well, what we wanted to try to accomplish yesterday was to get these facts out before the American people since most people don't have the opportunity to read that lengthy report, and they had it filtered instead by the likes of Bill Barr, who misrepresented what it had to say, and Donald Trump, who continues, as you point out, to misrepresent Bob Mueller's work. So that was at least my objective, was to help get the facts out and also find out what didn't Mueller investigate. What do we still need to do to protect the country? And it was clear to me anyway yesterday he did not follow the money. So someone needs to do the investigation into money laundering. Were the Russians laundering money through the Trump businesses? Is that leverage they possess over this president? Is that why?
Who's going to do that investigation? Is it going to be your committee, or I mean, what do you do about it now? I mean, you can impeach, you can have further investigations, or we can try to vote the guy out. What are we as Americans going to do with this information?
Well, what we're doing in the Intelligence Committee is we are following the money. We're investigating that issue of money laundering potentially by the Russians through Trump businesses. We're doing that along with the Financial Services Committee. We're investigating whether the Gulf countries use their economic leverage to influence U.S. policy. We're investigating whether people who are in the administration now have security clearances when they should have been rejected. People who tried to set up secret back channels through Russian diplomatic facilities like Jared Kushner. So we are doing the investigations, and as you know, we're having a vigorous debate about whether we need to go beyond investigation to impeachment, and if so, when that should be done. So we are affirmatively working on all these issues. From the Intel Committee perspective, it's all about protecting the country.
Congressman Schiff, first of all, it's joy. I want to tell you, I thought you were just fantastic yesterday, a statesman par excellence. So doing what you did, and thank you for coming on the show today. And you said that following the money wasn't just a moral issue, it was a national safety issue. I thought that was an interesting comment. Why do you say that? Can you elaborate?
Well, you know, if you look at the president's effort during the campaign to make millions, hundreds of millions, according to special counsel, from this Trump Tower in Moscow while concealing it from the American people, reaching out to the Kremlin, having phone calls with the Kremlin, emails with the Kremlin. Michael Cohen said that he felt, and he was convinced the president did too, that without Putin's approval, they were never going to get this project done. If this president still wants to build that tower, that compromises us if that's why he can't confront Putin. And indeed, when it was exposed, all the lies about Trump Tower were exposed, and Donald Trump was asked about it, he said, well, that's not a crime. I can essentially lie to the American people about it, conceal it. That's not a crime. And more than that, why should I miss out on those opportunities? Why should I miss out on all that money? If that is still his attitude today, then the campaign was not only the greatest infomercial in history, but the very presidency is a continuation of that infomercial.
Congressman, this is Meghan McCain. You have claimed for years now that you have a smoking gun of evidence of collusion. Your quote is ample evidence of collusion. You said that. But Robert Mueller in his investigation found that there was no collusion. So can you share with us right here, right now, on The View, the evidence that you have and explain why Mueller was wrong yesterday?
Well, first of all, Mueller wasn't wrong. Mueller started out by saying we didn't address the issue of collusion. So those who are saying no collusion,
well, what's your
they're
evidence?
just wrong.
You've been saying that on TV for years.
Well, I will tell you, and I've also been saying, as you know, that the evidence is in plain sight, not hidden anywhere. And we went through that evidence. The Russians offered dirt on Hillary Clinton in writing and sent it to Don Jr. And Don Jr.'s response was in writing and said, as for your offer of foreign illegal help, I would love it. He accepted the offer. They set up an overt act in furtherance of that, the secret meeting at Trump Tower, and they lied about it. You have an offer of illegal help. You have the acceptance of that offer. You have an overt act in furtherance of that conspiracy. That is, I think, by any rational American's expectation, the personification of collusion. Now, Bob Mueller had a different question he needed to analyze, which is, can I prove each of the elements of the crime of conspiracy beyond a reasonable doubt? And as you know, well before the Mueller report, I was pointing out to the public, there's a difference between what we understand as collusion and whether you can prove all the elements of crime.
So would you consider yesterday a big win for Democrats? Would you consider yesterday a big win for Democrats?
You know, I would consider it a win for the American people that they got to hear from the person who did the investigation. They got to hear, unfiltered by anybody else, what he found. You know, for the former director of the FBI and the special counsel to say effectively the president acted immorally, unethically, unpatriotically, and likely in a criminal fashion. The American people needed to hear. If you're measuring whether this is a success in terms of whether it brings us closer to impeachment or not, that was not my object with wanting him to come in. My object was to find out what work did you do, what conclusions did you reach, and what work do we need to do to follow up on counterintelligence or compromise information to protect the country.
Chairman, has it brought you closer to an impeachment inquiry?
I don't know. Because the facts that he testified were not new, they were from the report as we expected they would be. I was, I think, very circumspect about what we would hope to get from the hearing on that issue. I tried an impeachment case in the Senate 10 years ago against a corrupt federal judge, and we convicted him. And I have a good idea, I think, about what it takes to get a conviction in the Senate. And I'm not the least bit sanguine about that. But the jury that I care the most about is the jury of the American people, and what message an impeachment that results in an acquittal in the Senate will leave for the future generations about this president's conduct.
But is that the right question to ask? Can I ask you, is that the right question to ask? Because you just went through the elements and the facts that we know that prove what you said was, you know, the perfect case for collusion. So if we've got those facts, if we've got that information, how do you justify to the American people not following up with an impeachment inquiry?
Well, the Constitution provides impeachment as a remedy. It doesn't compel Congress to act and impeach whenever there are grounds for impeachment. And I think we have to consider, what will an impeachment and an acquittal in the Senate say about whether this president's conduct is compatible with office, if the president can later make the claim, having been acquitted, that this is not impeachable conduct. So I do think about what message we are sending today, what message we're sending the country, and whether it makes sense to go down that road knowing what the result will be. I'm keeping an open mind, but I have yet to be fully persuaded. And before we take the country through what will probably be a year-long and certainly very centrally focused effort by the Congress, I want to make sure that it's the right thing to do for the country.
And may I add that he will present himself as a victim, and that may not play well. So the main thing is to get him out. Let me ask you.
There's no question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let me ask you this, because Mueller made it very clear that Russia meddled in our elections. The Republicans haven't done anything to fix it. McConnell doesn't want to be bothered. Let's be honest. They are really helped by it. They're the party that Russia wants in power. How do you fight that? How do we stop foreign governments from interfering in the future? I mean, they're doing it all over the world, apparently. Paper ballot.
Well, I mean, this is, you know, one of the other hopes of having Bob Mueller come in, which is to make the case why we need to protect our elections infrastructure, why we need to redouble our efforts, that the Russians have never stopped meddling and they're going to continue to meddle. And I think the reason why probably the most powerful moment in the hearing for me was when Mueller acknowledged that he's already worried that this is the new normal, that is, that American candidates are going to think it's okay to receive foreign assistance. And if we get to that point, then we are truly sunk. And of course, the one who's rationalizing, normalizing all this is the President of the United States. We can only partially control what the Russians do. We can control, though, what we do. Right. And it's going to fall on the American people to say, you know, that's not okay here, and anyone who thinks it is needs to be voted out of office.
Here's the thing, Congressman. It's up to you all. This is in your hands.
Yeah.
This is in all of your hands, both the Republicans and the Democrats. You are sitting with the power to make this change. If you allow people to continue to break the law, continue to flout the idea that because there's some sort of mini new thing that someone's written in and they've decided they're not going to come and do what any other American would have to do, then this is going to be on your backs, because we can't do anything until y'all do something. So y'all need to do this. Yep. We thank you for coming, Adam Schiff. We'll be right back.
Welcome to...
Later, Fred Savage on why his wild new series will have you asking, what just happened?
Welcome back. We want to get some good news into the headlines right now. So on Tuesday, the bill that authorizes long-term funding for the 9/11 Victims' Compensation Fund was overwhelmingly passed. The only two who voted against it, keep these names in mind, were Senators Rand Paul and Mike Lee. Bye! Yeah. A lot of stars over the years have been pushing and going and doing this, and the last push by Jon Stewart was brilliant.
And it wasn't just the stars, because it was also the responders, the first responders themselves.
Yes.
The testimony
Yes.
of the guy who was, Luis Alvarez, who was in his deathbed. He literally died a few days after he testified.
He got up and went
was
there.
incredibly powerful. I don't understand why it took so long, why this guy had to die without this being passed. Why we got to this place.
You tell me.
Why indeed?
You're in that party. You tell me. That's Rand Paul. I don't know. I don't understand it.
I'm not a Rand Paul Republican.
Oh, well.
Well, he's not really a Republican. He's more of a libertarian.
I'm not a Rand Paul
and
human.
He votes with them. He votes with the Republican Party.
He does, but he's I mean, we don't need to get into an existential conversation about libertarianism, but he was wrong, and this will be on his record forever. But we're not going to forget that.
I hope so.
And as a testament to the power of protests, Puerto Rico's governor, Ricardo Rosselló, announced he's out. He's out starting a week from today. Get out, bye, go away, adios.
Can we talk a second about this? Because I remember, I think it was last week, I was railing on about how people are not taken to the streets the way we did during the Vietnam War and all this other stuff. And here you have Puerto Rico doing what we should be doing, in my opinion. So I get this thing on Facebook. Somebody writes, and he knows who he is, a friend of mine, actually. Will someone tell Joy Behar that we're doing the protesting on Facebook and on Twitter? Well, that's not working. To me, that does not work. First of all, it goes into the ether somewhere.
But if you can't go,
It did in the Arab Spring.
Yeah.
I mean, it had a huge impact on Arab Spring.
I don't see it as the same thing.
Well, let me tell you.
In Puerto Rico,
when I saw what was happening in Puerto Rico, and let's remember, they have been protesting now through heat, through rain, day after day, in the nights. I mean, it's been over 10 days that they have been
because they went through hell with that hurricane.
But like when I looked at them, I kind of thought of that scene from When Harry Met Sally. I want to have what they're having. I want us to not normalize the fact that we've got a divisive, offensive, lying, complicit, criminal jerk in the White House.
That's right.
We have become too accustomed to it, and I think that the Puerto Ricans have proved that when you don't normalize, when you don't accept, you can make change. And I also think we need to recognize the power of journalism, because it was journalists that brought out the chats that revealed just what a pig this guy was and how horrible he was.
Well, those texts were a smoking gun. We would like to have some of that, too.
Well, I mean, not everybody can get to Puerto Rico to protest. People do it the best they can, and I say...
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about here.
But I'm talking about, not everybody can get to every place to do what they need to do.
Some people have to work during the day.
Listen, the Women's March was not nothing to sneeze at. Scared a lot of people.
That's right. That's why it works.
Yes, it does.
Puerto Rico has like 4 million, less than 4 million inhabitants, and they had about 500,000 out in the streets.
Yes.
That'd be like 50 million in the United States.
Well, when people get tired of stuff, they'll get up and get out. They will. We will. We'll be... Welcome back. We're talking about protests just before we went to break, and I just want to bring up two things that I have questions about, and that is what is sacred? What does sacred mean to people? So hundreds of Native Hawaiians spent the last week at the foot of a dormant volcano, Mauna Kea, which they consider to be sacred ground, to protest the construction of a $1.4 billion telescope. Now, actor Dwayne Johnson joined the protest yesterday, but here's my question. Who decides what is sacred ground to people? I mean, we've seen it with the Native Americans. People just say, well, we're going to put the pipeline on your land. So is it okay to say, well, we're going to put a telescope in the middle of Arlington? That's sacred ground.
Right.
So who decides what is sacred ground? That is my question to all of us. if we know that your religion believes this to be sacred ground and it's been that for thousands of years, why isn't that good enough? And where are all the religions? Where are all of them? Aren't they? Shouldn't they be saying, hey, listen, these are people's religious beliefs. Get off of them. Because I keep hearing about this war. But maybe the war is just on 2 religions and not on the millions that are out there. That's my thing. And then the other thing I want to tell you is a dear friend of mine passed away couple of days ago. His name was Rutger Hauer. He's a wonderful actor.
Oh, Rutger Hauer.
He was in movies like Blade Runner and Lady Hawk, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and one of my favorite movies ever.
Sorry, it's fantastic.
It's great, and he was great, and he's going to be missed. He's just amazing.
I met him one time. Charming, very
charming, just
good
great. Yeah.
I'm really glad you brought up the Hawaiian issue, because I think what we just saw in Puerto Rico is the power of protesting, the power of people going directly to the streets. But it also helped that they had celebrities, that they had social media, that they had so many people echoing it, and it became a national issue. And so because they're in Hawaii, we can't forget them. And there's 13 telescopes already on the mountain. How many more telescopes do you need?
Move it over.
I think, like, there's been it's not a scandal, but recently, like in Arizona, there's Native American land where Havasupai Falls is, which is this really insanely, I think, one of the wonders of the world. This gorgeous falls at the edge of the Grand Canyon. And Beyonce filmed part of her new Lion King music video and she had to get permission from the tribal members and the leaders in order to go there to film. And they gave her permission, and they came out saying, and I'm paraphrasing, that she's been a proponent of water rights, she's been respectful to this area, so we allowed her to tape part of her video here. So I think there can be connection between people who want to respect Native land and want to honor Native land, but obviously I believe that people who were born and raised and have cultural heritage in that land, especially in places like Hawaii and Arizona, they should be the ones making the decision.
Yeah, especially since, we have not always been good with the Native Americans on any of the land. We've never really been, we don't have a really good record. So this is important, and I hope you look into it and wonder, if I feel it's sacred, why can't you? We'll be right back.
Does Trump know Hawaii?
Up next, Fred Savage on whether he's on board for a Wonder Years family reunion and one of his biggest pet peeves now that he has a family of his own. Tomorrow, The View's hot topics are setting your summer on fire.
What? I like that.
And we're fired up because, tell them, Joy.
It's Friday.
Oh, yeah. And Titus Burgess is hanging with us. Tomorrow on The View.
We watched Fred Savage grow up in front of the cameras since the iconic series Wonder Years, and he's spending the summer on one of the most talked about, appropriately named new shows called What Just Happened? Yes. Please welcome the fabulous Fred Savage. Somebody told me that when you were a kid auditioning in the Chicago area, your dad and you used to drive to the auditions, and he would play you what?
Comedy albums. We would listen to comedy albums. I lived in the suburbs, and so there were auditions when I was a kid downtown in Chicago. So we would drive from school, and it was a long drive, in the afternoon back and forth from downtown. And so my dad, I loved going with my dad because he would, that guy. That's a guy.
That's nice. Some head of hair on you.
It's a big head of hair.
Yeah.
There's a lot of volume. A lot of volume. My dad loved that.
You grew into it.
You think so? My dad, yeah. And we would listen to comedy albums on the way, and that was like this thing that me and my dad did that I loved, and they were like, not appropriate, but like I loved it. And
How old were you?
I was, 6, 7, 8, 9, and we would listen to Rodney Dangerfield and Joan Rivers and Billy Crystal. We listened to Comic Relief all the time. Yeah. Every time a new album come out, we'd get
George Carlin?
We didn't do Carlin. I think my dad had a line. You know what I mean? But even with my kids, like my little kids, they would say to me, they'd be like, Dad, I know what you're saying is funny. I don't know why, but I can hear what you're saying. It's
Right.
they learn rhythm. They learn rhythm.
Yes.
And so there were so many things that when I listen to those albums now, Eddie Murphy we would listen to.
Yep.
So the line was, far.
Really?
But I would probably miss most of the jokes.
Yeah.
But you know when to laugh. There's a rhythm. And so I feel like that lesson I've
learned.
Yeah.
So is that what you learned to cuss too, or did
That's
you know
how,
that from-
yeah. Well, my dad had a very strict rule. He's like, look, he goes, we can do this in the car, but if I hear you using the language outside, then we don't get to listen to them.
Because your mom was like not happy about it.
No, my mom was not into it. But as long as we didn't use it outside of the car, because then we had to shut it down. But I loved it so much, I didn't want to break it.
So, there's a lot of reboots going on. It reminded me, Magnum P.I., Hawaii Five-0, they're all coming back. And they want maybe Wonder Years to come back, but you don't think that's a good idea. Why not?
Well, I think it was, the whole conceit of the show was kind of about this time in your life, this finite time in your life that you can't go back to, and that's kind of why people look back on your adolescence with such fondness and heartbreak, and it's a very bittersweet thing because you can't go back. So I feel like it's kind of built into the show that it's really not to be revisited.
Well, there's always a new generation that wants to look back.
Yeah, well, it's on DVD.
It could be done.
There's ways to do it. My mom will show you. She shows my kids. Go to my mom's house. She'll tell you all about it.
Well, first I have to tell you, I was so sad Friends from College got canceled. I loved that show.
Meghan.
I
Yes,
watched
thank
every
you.
episode. Please bring it back. I would love it if ABC would just get on top of that. Anyway, but you've directed 200 episodes of Modern Family, The Connors. You're also one of the creators of your new show, What Just Happened, and you play a heightened version of yourself. So can you tell us about that?
Yes, okay, so What Just Happened is a show we created, and it's an after show, kind of like Watch What Happens Live or Talking Dead. It's an after show for a show that doesn't exist. And so we came up with this show called The Flare, which is this big post-apocalyptic drama, and the first 2 minutes of our show is the last 2 minutes of an episode of The Flare. And so it always ends, yeah, you get it, right? It's funny. Thanks, man. And so it always ends in some moment of suspense or high drama, and it kind of minimizes in the bottom of the screen. When the show's over and it cuts to me on stage, I go, what just happened? That was crazy. And then we have an after show to talk about it.
And you brought us a clip, I understand.
Yes, so this is Shiri Appleby is one of the actresses on
love
The
her.
Flare. She's the best.
Roswell,
Yeah,
love that show too.
They're great. Unreal. She's amazing. And she gives me a tour of the set of The Flare. But because it's super top secret and because it's really not real, we have to blur a lot of things out.
Let's watch it.
The clip.
The real heroes of this production is the prop department.
Is that what I think it is?
It is.
Does it work?
Of course. Are you kidding me? The engineers spent millions building it.
Oh my gosh.
How did you do that? Right?
You okay?
That's amazing.
Oh my gosh!
And so as the piece goes on and on, more and more gets blurred out. And so it's just my head, and I'm on set and can't show anything. So it's a lot of fun.
Since you play a TV host now, we found a clip for Throwback Thursday of you from 30 years ago with a real TV host, Johnny Carson. I
Oh my
miss him
gosh.
so much. So let's take a look at the clip.
Okay.
Somebody said you met somebody you really admired at the show. Clint Eastwood?
Clint Eastwood, yes. Yeah. I really like it.
What was that like to be a kid? What do you remember from that?
When you're doing it,
And you were
you can
so
applaud.
cute.
You can applaud. Go with it. If you feel it, go with it. It's funny, when you're doing it, you don't quite realize what's happening, but sitting here with you guys now, looking at that, it's amazing to trace the line from that to here today. Meghan, you were saying, like, I started as an actor, then a director, then a producer, that, like, you stick around long enough, you start to wear all these hats, and to just connect to that kid standing across from Johnny Carson is pretty, it's amazing. It's much cooler now.
You owe it
looking
all to
back.
your father.
I owe it all to my father and the hair, and those comedy tapes. I owe it all to my dad.
What about your wife? I hear you married for 15 years.
We're going to have 15 years in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
In 2 weeks. Yeah, that's Jennifer. She's great. She's great.
Any complaints?
A couple.
Be careful.
15 years.
Be
You have a photo. Do you guys have this photo? They show this. She's look at that. She's a monster.
I do that. I do
Oh,
that.
Megan.
I do that.
She's
I
a,
do
look,
that.
My wife's great mom.
Crazy.
Great mom. Terrific partner. Very supportive. Love her to death.
But
15
this-
years. But that's just, you can't. That's
Lock her up.
Inside,
Lock her up.
there's something wrong because you can't do that. That's just bad behavior. You do that, Megan? Why? How much harder is it?
also makes
How much
my husband insane.
How much harder is it just to do the thing, you know?
Then I'm sorry. Fred Savage told me to stop doing it.
My husband does it, and it drives me. And I want to crawl up the walls. But here's the solution.
Oh, well, we got to get those two together, Jenny and your husband.
They now,
There's toilet paper
they now sell those things that don't hook on both sides. They just hook on one.
Yeah.
So there's actually a Solomonic solution.
All right, great. So we've made it easier. The hassle of changing a toilet paper roll, we've now removed that.
Put one on each side.
Wait, I have to ask you about one more thing.
But I love her very much.
Of course.
We know that.
And I'm so lucky that she's staying with me.
There's a cause close to your heart. There's a story of a poor girl who thinks she looks like you. Can you explain?
Yes. This was a woman who, someone said she looked like me, and she started a GoFundMe campaign to raise money for plastic surgery so she didn't have to look like me. And everyone says that's terrible, but I'll tell you, I appreciate it, because I would not have picked this face and body, you know? And, if, you know, so I get it. I get it. I donated $50.
I think she's pretty.
Yeah.
What's so cute? What are you talking about?
Well, I mean, she wanted surgery because someone said she looked like me.
So, yes, Whoopi. That's where we are right now.
This is what's going on.
Nice to see you, man.
Whoopi, it's a
Been
pleasure.
a long time. Been
Thank
a long
you so
time.
much. I love coming to see you guys.
What Just Happened airs Sunday nights. Check it out. We'll be right back.